Week 16 of the fantasy football season, and here quarterback start sits of every matchup. This week, the first matchup of the week's Jacksonville Jaguars at the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. So right here, what a few weeks it's been now for Trevor Lawrence, and he's living up to that number one pick status over the last few weeks here, getting guys involved. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram going off over the last few weeks. This Jacksonville Jaguar team beating some good teams, Baltimore Ravens, coming back from 17 and beating the Cowboys in Week 15. And this week here versus the New York Jets, I think this is going to be a close game. But I think Trevor Lawrence in this one has a good performance once again. And he's definitely a quarterback to start. Now to the Jets side of things, Mike White, if he plays, I would sit him. We don't know how those ribs are. They're definitely not 100% after fracturing them a few weeks ago. And this Jet team, I think they don't even know who they really want to start at quarterback. So anyway, Mike White, if he plays, I would sit him. But it looks like Zach Wilson is going to play in this game. And I know last week he went over 300 yards, was the youngster Zach Wilson. But I can't trust him in a big spot. I know this Jaguar D isn't the greatest of units, but I think this week they could put on some pressure in this one is Jacksonville and make it tough for Zach Wilson. So I got him as a sit. Now to the Saints at the Cleveland Browns. Andy Dalton, he's been decent veteran presence this season for the New Orleans Saints, but I'm surprised they never went back to Jameis Winston. That just shows he's injured still, or he's just that bad of a quarterback. So Andy Dalton, I know he's had a few good games this season here and there, but this week in Cleveland, I'm not going to trust him. The only way I would start him, obviously, if you're in a 2-quarterback league and have no choice, or you're in the deepest of leagues, 16, 20-team league, but this week, he's a sit. And now to the Cleveland Browns side of things, I think Deshaun Watson, I got a feeling, finally breaks out and has that monster ball game we've been waiting for over the last few weeks here since he's returned to this Cleveland Brown team. But anyway, Deshaun Watson, we know he's an athlete. We know he's got good weapons in Cooper, Peoples-Jones, and Njoku. And he just got to establish that a little more, make the plays a little bit easier. He's still going for that home run ball and that big, quick touchdown is Deshaun Watson. But this week here versus the Saints, I think he'll calm down a little bit and have a good ball game. Now to the Falcons at the Ravens. Desmond Ridder last week, he didn't impress me at all, holding on to the football a lot, looking to run a lot as well and taking a big sack here and there. And right now, there's not that many weapons on this Falcon team besides Tyler Algier. Cordell Patterson's pretty decent, and Drake London, who's an up-and-coming rookie wide receiver. But right now, in a game in Baltimore, I don't see Ridder doing much, and that's where a lot of young quarterbacks have had trouble over the last few seasons here. So Ridder's a sit for me. And Lamar Jackson, supposedly he's coming back in this ball game because Tyler Huntley, I thought would be something, but obviously the last 2 weeks here he's contributed and he didn't do nothing. Is Tyler Huntley. So as long as Lamar Jackson's back in this game, it's a good game to get him back in versus a weak Atlanta Falcon defense on the road here. And Lamar, I think, comes back and has a good one. And he's a quarterback I would start this week. Now to the Bengals at the New England Patriots. Joe Burrow, he's been on a tear over the last 5 or 6 weeks here. And this Bengal team, they're prime and ready to make maybe another serious run in the AFC this season after falling short last season, losing in the Super Bowl. So anyway, I know it's not the greatest of matchups versus Bill Belichick and this tough defense here, but Joe Burrow's been great all season. He's a top 3-5 quarterback in fantasy points this year as well. And he's got great weapons in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. So this week here, Joe Burrow, even in a tough matchup, comes through and has a good game, and I have him as a start. On the other hand, Mac Jones, he just hasn't done anything really this season. He's taken a step back more than anything, and the injuries haven't been all that great as well here on and off for Mac Jones. But anyway, with all those factors against him, and this Bengal defense actually being serviceable and playing pretty well, especially causing 4 turnovers last week here, Joe Burrow's I got the start, and Mac Jones is the sit this week. Now to the Bills at the Chicago Bears. There's not much to say in this one. Josh Allen, matchup proof, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks, if not the best once again this season in fantasy points. And you start him with confidence in this one, and this is why you came this far, most likely, for owners, because of Josh Allen. Out to Justin Fields, he came back over the last few weeks, and he's still putting up numbers. The only thing with Fields is I feel like he's one more hit away from his season ending here, but with his playmaking ability and just the running yards alone here, this guy's getting 80, 90 yards on the ground, it seems like, weekly. Even versus this tough Buffalo team, we know Fields is a gamer, and I think he'll make a few plays happen. So right now, I have both these quarterbacks as a start this week in the Windy City. Now to the Giants at the Minnesota Vikings. Daniel Jones, he's been a decent player this season, but I don't think he's done enough to garner much fantasy value. 22 points at most you're going to get out of Daniel Jones. I know this defense isn't great over there in Minnesota, but this time here, I think Daniel Jones is a sit, even if he could get things going a little bit versus this Viking team. Do you really trust him in a playoff game in fantasy to go out there and get 25 plus fantasy points? I don't, and that's what you need sometimes to push the envelope and win these leagues. But right now, like I said, he's a sit as Daniel Jones, and Kirk Cousins is a start. The last 2 weeks has been the best fantasy days of the season for Cousins. Last week, 460 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. And this Giants secondary we know is leaky. I expect Justin Jefferson to have another monster game, and also TJ Hawkinson I think will be good as well. But Kirk Cousins, he's a guy you got to start with confidence, and I know people are waiting for the other shoe to drop, and if it does, it is what it is. But Kirk Cousins, he's definitely a top 10 fantasy quarterback next year. Now to the Lions at the Panthers. Jared Goff, the numbers have definitely gone down on the road, as at home he was playing great football on this Lions team, but even though last week they pulled it out by a field goal towards the end of the game here, this week I think Jared Goff could put up decent numbers. I know this Panther defense is pretty good at home for the most part, but Jared Goff's got good weapons. Amon St. Brown, DJ Chark, even though he didn't catch a ball he only caught 2 passes in last week's game, was DJ Chark, and Jameson Williams is trying to get him in there, and they're just using him as a deep ball threat so far as Detroit. But he's got decent weapons, got a decent matchup, and Goff I got as a start. Now to the Panthers, Sam Darnold. This team's actually 2-1 since Darnold returned from injury, and he's getting DJ Moore the ball. Chuba Hubbard's been decent out of the backfield receiving the football, but he don't have a lot of weapons here where I could go in there and say he's a start. In deeper leagues, obviously 2 quarterbacks, and 16-team leagues or deeper, he's a borderline option here, Sam Darnold. But in a big playoff spot, he's hard to trust. Now to the Seattle Seahawks at the Kansas City Chiefs. Geno Smith, he's been pretty solid for the most part this season, but last week was one of the worst fantasy games of the year for him with 17 fantasy points. And now with Tyler Lockett most likely out of this game, that's another obstacle to verse. But right here, this is going to be a game where they're most likely going to be trailing and have to chase points, and Geno Smith still has DK Metcalf. He still could get you 4 or 5 points weekly on the ground. The way he runs the football is Geno Smith and picks his spots. And this week here at Kansas City, it's a huge ball game for the Seattle team. So I think Geno tries to go all out, but at best he's a borderline option. Now to Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback possibly this season in fantasy football. Last week here, that ball game went to overtime, but Mahomes in that one over 35 fantasy points. And this week, I think he could reach similar numbers versus Seattle defense that don't really step up. They don't really make plays. And their defense you can move the football on, and that's exactly what Mahomes is going to do. Possibly being ranked number 1 or 2 in my rankings this week. Now to the Texans at the Tennessee Titans. So right here, Davis Mills is a sit. He really hasn't done much, and even getting back into the starting lineup here, Davis Mills hasn't looked all that great. I know he's had some garbage time points. I know they took the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cowboys to the limit, but it wasn't really Davis Mills doing most of the work. So right here this week versus a Tennessee defense that played well last week versus a great Charger offense here, I can't trust Davis Mills, and he's a sit. And Ryan Tannehill, on the other hand, he's another guy I can't trust. 1 week, it'll be over 20 fantasy points, and then the other week, 7 or 8 fantasy points. So right here, I know it's the Texans, but the last 2 weeks, they've played tough football versus tougher teams than the Tennessee Titans, and almost came away with a victory in both those games. So this week here, I think we see a Derrick Henry game like we did many weeks ago, where he rushed over 200 yards in a game a week where we started, and Tannehill won't do much in this one to be a fantasy option. Now to the Commanders at the San Francisco 49ers. Taylor Heineke, we know he's a gamer. We know he's a guy that wants to go out there, and he's a hard-nosed football player, but also he's a gunslinger as well as Taylor Heineke. And this week here versus a defense that takes opportunities and chances when that ball's up there, and a guy like Heineke fits right into what the 49ers are trying to do with their ball hawk mentality. So this week, no way I trust Heineke. I know he's got good weapons. I know they've been playing decent football for the most part, is the Commanders, but he's a sit. And Brock Purdy, the toast of the town right now in fantasy football over the last few weeks here. Brock Purdy's come in, and this Niner team hasn't missed a beat. You still got Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and McCaffrey out of the backfield. And this week here versus Washington Commander team where Chase Young might possibly make his season debut. I just think Purdy's a good start. And if you got an injury to Jalen Hurts or a Kyler Murray owner, Purdy's a good fill-in this week, no doubt about it. Now to the Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Mentioning Jalen Hurts, if he plays, you start him no matter what. He's an MVP and possibly could win the MVP as the candidate this season here. It's going to be him, Mahomes, or Allen most likely for that MVP title. But anyway, Jalen Hurts is a start. I know this Cowboy defense is good, but last week they definitely got exposed in the secondary by Zay Jones and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think Hurts could pick on it. So if Hurts don't play in this game, Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback. And obviously I'm not going to want any part of him. I know he's got all the weapons in A.J. Brown, Smith, Dallas Goedert returning to the starting lineup, which is always a great thing as well here. But right now, you can't trust Gardner Minshew, even with all those guys right here. Now, to Dak Prescott, he's just been down for the most part. I know last week he cracked 25 fantasy points, but he looks flat with his passes as Dak. He's throwing 1 or 2 interceptions per game, which obviously hurts fantasy owners with that -2, -4, depending how many picks. And I just feel like this Cowboy team won't ever get over the hump with Prescott. He's too inaccurate. He's not making all the right reads, and he's going for the home run ball a lot as well. And sometimes he just can't take what the defense gives him. So this week versus a tough Philly D-line, I got him as a sit. Now to the Raiders at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Derek Carr, it's been an up and down type of season. 1 week, everything's going great. Then the next week, they just can't get anything going or move the football. But coming off a crazy ball game and victory, and I don't know what the Patriots were doing with the lateral. The Raiders obviously took it to the house and won. But anyway, Derek Carr, he's only scoring about 20 fantasy points. He's maxing out at. And this Steelers defense plays better at home than they do on the road. So TJ Watt, I think, will be in the face of Derek Carr a few times in this one. But Carr obviously has weapons with Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs. And if Matt Collins and Hunter Renfrow could ever pan out to being anything, they're decent there. But anyway, he's a borderline option. And now it don't matter to me what Steelers quarterback starts in this one. They're not fantasy options in Pickett and Trubisky. I know it's a good matchup on paper, but right here, I don't see them doing much to garner more than 15 fantasy points in their ball game. Now to the Packers at the Miami Dolphins. Aaron Rodgers, he just hasn't been the same this season. I know he don't have his number one man anymore in Devontae Adams, but his chemistry is still off. We saw Monday night in Week 15 with some of his receivers, and the throws are just off as well, where he's not even close on some of them as Aaron Rodgers. So this week here, not versus the greatest of defenses in the Miami Dolphins. I got him as a borderline option at best. And now to the Dolphins side of thing, I know too his numbers over the last month of the season have gone down, but he's still a guy I have confidence in. They're back in the warm Miami weather. It's always a good thing. And Tua, he's still a guy with 2 great receivers that could put up big numbers any week. So this week he's a start. Now to the Broncos at the Rams. I don't want any part of this game for the most part. Russell Wilson, he's only had a couple decent games this season. And versus a decent Ram unit, he's going to be a sit for me. He's not 100%. And Brett Rypien last week, he actually led this team to victory, but that's not saying much. Versus an Arizona team with a majority of backups playing as well. But right here, if it's Wilson, he plays, he's a sit. And if it's Rypien with Wilson out, he's a sit. And now to Baker Mayfield, everyone was reacting and thinking he was back after that 98-yard drive to win the ball game versus the Raiders a few weeks ago. But last week, in Week 15, he was a crash test dummy versus the Green Bay Packers. And this Bronco D-line, they definitely still could bring the heat and get to the quarterback. So this week here, no way I'm going to trust Baker Mayfield. Now to the next ball game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Arizona Cardinals. So Tom Brady, I know he hasn't been great this season here, but he's still a guy that's thrown the football a ton. And he still has talented guys on the offense in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, even though it's been down years for them. But I think Brady goes into Arizona, indoor game, which is good, defense that don't stop anyone, and a team that can't win a ball game at all over the last 2 months, I believe, here for this Cardinal team. So I think Tom Brady could right the ship a little in this one. And I got him as a start. Now to the Cardinals, Colt McCoy, if he plays in this game, he's going to be a sit. And the injuries are definitely catching up to McCoy now. I know he got in that Sunday game. And then Trace McCloskey came into the game. So if they're starting either one of them, I don't want part of them. This Tampa Bay Buck team still a pretty decent unit. They had the Bengals shut down, but then the Bengals got short fields a lot of the drives here, and they started scoring. But I think this defense could do a number a McCoy or McCauley, whoever starts in the final game of the week, Los Angeles Chargers at the Indianapolis Colts. So Justin Herbert last week, surprising only 11 fantasy points about for him in a matchup versus the Tennessee Titans, who played good football last week. But this week, I'll go back to the well. Justin Herbert, weekly, is pretty much a 5 to 8 range top quarterback, and I think he gets it back in this ball game versus the Indianapolis Colts. Bright lights, Chargers got to keep winning, where they're just on the brink of holding on to a wild card spot here. And this Colt team really don't stop quarterbacks at all. And when you got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams as your 1 and 2, I think Herbert bounces back in a big way. And now to Matt Ryan, I don't know how you could trust him. A lot of turnovers, takes a lot of sacks. And this offense, they don't really move the football a lot here. It was the defense more versus the Minnesota Vikings in the running game. So Matt Ryan, I don't want a part of him. And he's a sit for me. So that's quarterback start, sits every matchup. Week 16 of the fantasy football season.